Dr. Lila Brennan had worked in enough high-security facilities to know that when alarms started blaring at 3 in the morning, it usually meant someone had either stolen something incredibly valuable or accidentally released something incredibly dangerous. What she hadn't expected was for the something to be 6 juvenile Zephyrian cubs who had apparently vanished into thin air from the most secure containment facility in the galaxy. "They're gone," announced Security Chief Veximore, a 7-foot-tall Krillian whose exoskeleton was currently vibrating with what Lila had learned to recognize as barely contained panic. Completely disappeared. No trace, no breach in containment, no evidence of teleportation technology. Gone, or just really good at hide-and-seek? Lila asked, not looking up from her paperwork. She was trying to finish her quarterly report on human integration protocols in multi-species environments, which was bureaucratic speak for why aliens keep asking humans to fix their problems. "Dr. Brennan, this is a Code Omega situation. The cubs are classified as potentially dangerous. They're 3 months old. They're Zephyrian 3-month-olds. Their species can phase through solid matter when distressed. So they're basically cosmic toddlers having a tantrum." Vexmore's mandibles clicked in what she'd learned was the Krillian equivalent of grinding teeth. The cubs were diplomatic gifts from the Zephyrian Empire to demonstrate their commitment to the peace accords. If they're harmed under council protection, let me guess, war? War. Lila finally looked up from her desk, taking in the sight of Vexmore surrounded by a dozen security officers, all looking like they'd rather be facing down a battalion of enemy soldiers than dealing with missing alien babies. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because you're human," said Commander Thale, the station's military liaison. He was a Viridian, which meant he looked like someone had crossed a tree with a very serious accountant. "Humans have unusual success rates with juvenile specimens. I'm a xenobiologist, not a babysitter. The statistical correlation is undeniable," Thale continued, pulling up a holographic display that made Lila's eyes water. 43 documented cases of successful human-juvenile-alien interaction. 0 casualties. 100% cooperation rates. That's because we don't treat them like weapons in training. Nevertheless, we need you to locate the cubs. Lila leaned back in her chair, which creaked ominously. The furniture in the research wing wasn't designed for humans, which meant everything was either too tall, too short, or made of materials that gave her a rash. "And how exactly am I supposed to find phasing alien toddlers that your entire security apparatus can't locate?" "We don't know," Vexmore admitted. "But every time there's been a situation involving lost juveniles, humans find them within hours. Usually because we check the obvious places first, such as food storage, comfortable hiding spots, anywhere warm and quiet." Lila stood up, stretching muscles that had been cramped from hunching over alien-sized furniture for 6 hours. "Have you checked the ventilation systems?" The silence that followed was profound and deeply embarrassing. "The ventilation systems," Thale repeated slowly. "Yeah. Dark, warm, easy to hide in. Perfect for scared kids." Lila pulled on her hoodie, a battered gray thing that had somehow survived 3 years of galactic service. Though, if they can phase through matter, they might not be in the vents so much as the walls themselves. Vexmore's exoskeleton went completely still. "The walls." "The walls," Lila confirmed. "You know, those vertical things that hold up the ceiling?" 20 minutes later, Lila found herself crawling through a maintenance shaft with a handheld scanner that kept beeping apologetically every time it failed to detect phased matter. Behind her, she could hear Vexmore's increasingly frantic communications with the search teams. "Sector 7 clear, no thermal signatures. Sector 12 negative, expanding search parameters. Maybe try looking for signs of habitation instead of the cubs themselves," Lila called back. "Food scraps, disturbed materials, that sort of thing." "Excellent suggestion," came Thala's voice through the comm. "All teams, look for secondary indicators of juvenile presence." Lila rolled her eyes and continued crawling. The maintenance shaft was cramped, dark, and smelled like recycled air and metal polish. It was also, she realized, Exactly the kind of place she would have hidden as a kid if she'd been scared and alone in a strange place. "Hey," she called softly into the darkness ahead. "Anyone in here? I'm not security. Just someone who's really tired and wants to go back to her paperwork." Silence. "Look, I get it. New place, weird smells, everyone panicking. It's rough." She paused at a junction in the maintenance system. "But hiding in the walls isn't going to solve anything. Eventually you're going to get hungry, and the food's all outside." A soft sound drifted from the left passage. Not quite a whimper, not quite a chirp. "There we go," Lila murmured, turning toward the sound. "I'm coming your way, okay? Just me. No scary security guards." The passage opened into a small utility room filled with humming machinery and blessed with actual human-sized space. And there, huddled behind a power coupling, were 6 of the most pathetic-looking creatures Lila had ever seen. Zephyrian cubs looked like someone had crossed a kitten with a small dragon and then covered the result in fur that shifted color based on mood. Currently, all 6 were a deep blue-gray that she was pretty sure meant terrified and miserable. "Well, hello there," she said softly, settling cross-legged on the floor. "You guys having a rough day?" The largest, cub, probably the group's leader, watched her with eyes that were far too intelligent for something that should have been playing with toys. The others clustered behind him, occasionally flickering in and out of visibility as their phasing abilities activated involuntarily. "Yeah, I know the feeling," Lila continued conversationally. "New job, new people, everyone expecting you to know what you're doing. It's exhausting." She pulled a protein bar from her hoodie pocket and unwrapped it slowly. The cub's attention focused on the food with laser precision. "Want some? It's not much, but it's better than whatever they've been trying to feed you in the containment facility." The leader cub took a cautious step forward, then another. Within minutes, all 6 were clustered around her, sharing the protein bar and making soft trilling sounds that might have been contentment. "There we go," Lila said, gently stroking the leader's fur. "Much better than hiding in the walls." That's when her comm unit crackled to life. "Dr. Brennan, report status immediately." "Found them," she replied, trying to keep her voice low. "They're fine. Just scared." "Excellent. Maintain position. Security teams are en route to collect them." "Actually," Lila said, watching as the cubs immediately pressed closer to her at the mention of security teams, "I think that might be counterproductive. Dr. Brennan, those cubs need to be returned to secure containment immediately." "They need to be returned to somewhere they feel safe," she corrected. "And right now, that's with me." The silence that followed was ominous. "Dr. Brennan," came Vexmore's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. "Are you suggesting that we allow 6 potentially dangerous alien juveniles to remain in your custody?" Lila looked down at the cubs, who were now dozing peacefully against her legs and arms. One had somehow managed to burrow partially into her hoodie pocket. "I'm suggesting," she said carefully, "that maybe your containment protocols need some work. The cubs must be secured according to diplomatic guidelines." "The cubs," Lila interrupted, "are currently more secure than they've been since they arrived. They're calm, they're not phasing through walls, and they're not causing a diplomatic incident." Another pause. Then, "Dr. Brennan, you will return to the research wing immediately with the cubs." "Copy that," Lila said, then switched off her comm. She looked down at the sleeping cubs and sighed. "Well, guys, looks like we're about to find out just how seriously the galactic community takes their babysitting protocols." The leader cub opened one eye, looked at her with what might have been sympathy, and promptly fell back asleep. Lila had the distinct feeling that her quiet life as a xenobiologist was about to become significantly more complicated. The research wing's main corridor had been transformed into what could generously be called a tactical situation, and more accurately described as bureaucratic chaos with weapons. Security officers flanked the hallway at 10-foot intervals, while diplomatic representatives from 6 different species clustered around her office door like very well-dressed vultures. "Dr. Brennan," Ambassador Kethlin greeted her with the kind of smile that suggested she was either very pleased or planning someone's assassination. The Zephyrian diplomat was elegant in the way that apex predators were elegant. Beautiful, graceful, and absolutely terrifying. How delightful to find you. Intact. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Lila replied dryly, adjusting her hoodie where 2 cubs had taken up residence in the front pocket. The other 4 were distributed around her person in various states of drowsiness, clinging to her arms and shoulders like furry, color-shifting accessories. The cubs appear attached, observed Dr. Velthar, the station's chief xenobiologist. He was a Thalaxian, which meant he looked like a very serious praying mantis in a lab coat. This level of bonding typically takes months to establish. Maybe that's because most people don't start by scaring them half to death with containment protocols. The protocols are necessary for safety, began Commander Thaley. Whose safety? Lila interrupted. Because from where I'm standing, the only thing those cubs were dangerous to was their own stress levels. Ambassador Kethlin's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. Dr. Brennan, are you familiar with Zephyrian bonding customs? I'm familiar with the fact that you sent 6 babies to a diplomatic station without their parents, and then acted surprised when they got upset. The cubs were gifts, Kethlin explained patiently. Symbols of trust and future cooperation. Their care was to be handled by council specialists. Right. Specialists who immediately locked them in a containment facility and wondered why they started phasing through walls. Dr. Velthar was taking notes at a frantic pace. The bonding response is unprecedented. Zephyrian cubs typically require extensive socialization periods before accepting non-parental caregivers. Maybe they just needed someone to treat them like individuals instead of diplomatic assets. The silence that followed was broken by one of the cubs making a soft trilling sound and nuzzling against Lila's neck. The assembled diplomats watched this display with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. Dr. Brennan, Security Chief Vexmore approached with the careful movements of someone trying not to startle a dangerous animal. We need to discuss the security implications of this situation. What security implications? They're taking a nap. They're taking a nap on you, in your clothing. This level of physical contact suggests that they're tired and I'm warm. It's not complicated. But even as she said it, Lila could see the wheels turning in the aliens' heads. The way they were looking at her, and more importantly, at the cubs, suggested that something significant was happening that she didn't understand. Ambassador, Dr. Velthar said carefully, perhaps you could explain the cultural significance of Zephyrian juvenile attachment behaviors? Kethlin's elegant features arranged themselves into what Lila was beginning to recognize as diplomatic panic. Among our species, cubs only demonstrate such intimate bonding behaviors with their chosen pack leaders. Pack leaders. The individual they have selected to guide their development into adulthood. It's a sacred bond, one that carries significant cultural and legal obligations. Lila felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. What kind of obligations? The kind that make you legally responsible for their upbringing, education, and cultural integration, Commander Thale said helpfully. Congratulations, Dr. Brennan. You're now the adoptive parent of 6 alien dignitaries. I didn't adopt anyone. They just climbed into my hoodie. Intent is irrelevant, Kethlin said, though she looked almost sympathetic. The bond has been established. According to Zephyrian law, you are now their recognized guardian until they reach maturity. How long is that? Approximately 12 Earth years. Lila stared at the ambassador, then at the cubs, then at the assembled crowd of officials who were all watching her with varying degrees of awe and terror. This is insane. This is unprecedented, corrected Dr. Velthar. No non-Zephyrian has ever been chosen as a pack leader. The cultural implications are staggering. The political implications are worse, muttered Vexmore. If word of this gets out? Gets out? Lila looked around at the crowd of diplomats and security personnel. I think that ship has sailed. As if summoned by her words, her comm unit began chiming with incoming messages. Lots of incoming messages. The kind of volume that suggested news of her situation had already spread beyond the station. Dr. Brennan, came a new voice from the crowd. She turned to see High Counselor Zextul approaching, his crystalline form refracting the corridor lighting into prismatic patterns. We need to discuss the ramifications of this development. The ramifications of what? Babysitting? The ramifications of a human being chosen as pack leader by Zephyrian cubs. This has never happened in recorded history. Maybe that's because no one ever bothered to be nice to them before. The High Counselor's form shifted colors, and what she'd learned was the equivalent of deep thought. Dr. Brennan, do you understand what this means for interspecies relations? That maybe we should try treating alien children like children instead of political chess pieces? It means, Ambassador Kethlin interjected, that you have just become the most important human in the galaxy. Lila blinked. I'm sorry, what? If Zephyrian cubs can bond with humans, it suggests a level of compatibility that our xenobiologists deemed impossible. The research implications alone. Are you telling me that I'm going to become some kind of test subject because 6 scared kids decided I was safe? You're going to become the subject of the most intensive interspecies study in galactic history, Dr. Velthar said, his compound eyes practically glowing with scientific enthusiasm. The data we could gather from observing human Zephyrian bonding patterns could revolutionize our understanding of cross-species psychology. One of the cubs stirred in her hoodie pocket, making a sleepy questioning sound. Lila automatically reached down to stroke its fur, and the creature settled back into peaceful sleep. The entire corridor fell silent. Did you see that? Dr. Velthar whispered. The immediate calming response to human touch? The trust displayed by remaining in a vulnerable state? This is extraordinary. This is a diplomatic nightmare, Vexmore countered. If humans can bond with Zephyrian cubs, what does that mean for other species? Are we looking at a fundamental shift in galactic social structures? We're looking at 6 tired kids who needed someone to be kind to them, Lila said firmly. Everything else is just bureaucratic overreaction. But even as she said it, she could see the implications spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Whispered conversations, urgent comm calls, the kind of barely controlled excitement that suggested her life was about to become very, very complicated. Dr. Brennan, High Counselor Zextul said finally, I'm afraid this situation has moved far beyond simple childcare. You and the cubs will need to remain on the station pending a full council investigation. Investigation into what? Into whether humans represent the greatest breakthrough in interspecies relations in galactic history, Ambassador Kethlin said quietly, or the greatest threat to established diplomatic order. Lila looked down at the cubs, who were sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding them. One had somehow managed to wrap a tiny paw around her finger. Great, she muttered. Just great. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was being broadcast live across 17 star systems, which meant that Lila's morning routine of trying to feed 6 hyperactive alien toddlers while wearing pajamas was now galactic entertainment. The cubs had discovered that human breakfast foods were apparently the most delicious thing in the universe, and were currently engaged in what could generously be called enthusiastic eating, and more accurately described as adorable chaos. The implications, announced Counselor Vex Prime, a being that looked like someone had given a filing cabinet both consciousness and strong opinions, are unprecedented in galactic history. The implications, Lila muttered, trying to prevent one cub from wearing her cereal bowl as a hat, are that you people need better childcare protocols. She was attending the emergency session via hologram from her quarters, which had been hastily redesigned to accommodate both human needs and Zephyrian cub requirements. The result looked like someone had crossed a daycare center with a diplomatic suite and then hit it with a bureaucracy bomb. Dr. Brennan, came the voice of Ambassador Kethlin, who was physically present in the council chambers and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Perhaps you could explain to the council how you achieved such rapid bonding with the cubs. I gave them food and didn't try to lock them in a cage. Revolutionary? I know. The murmur that ran through the council chamber was audible even through the hologram. Lila was beginning to understand that her approach to childcare was apparently so radical, it qualified as a paradigm shift. The human's methods, observed Dr. Velthar, who had somehow managed to get himself appointed as chief researcher on what was being called the Brennan phenomenon, demonstrate unprecedented understanding of Zephyrian juvenile psychology. I demonstrated basic common sense. Common sense that no other species has managed to replicate in 3 centuries of diplomatic contact, pointed out Counselor Thexmar, whose species looked like they'd evolved from particularly judgmental mushrooms. One of the cubs, she'd started mentally calling him Trouble, had discovered that he could phase through solid matter to steal food from the other cub's bowls. This had led to a complex negotiation involving sharing protocols and the establishment of individual eating territories. The fact that she was mediating territorial disputes between alien toddlers while the galaxy's leadership watched in fascination was not lost on her. The cub's behavioral adaptations, Dr. Velthar continued, suggest that human social structures may be uniquely compatible with multiple alien species. Or maybe, Lila suggested, pausing in her attempt to convince a cub that her stylus was not food, most alien social structures are just really bad at dealing with children. The silence that followed was profound and deeply uncomfortable. Dr. Brennan, came a new voice, and Lila looked up to see that High Admiral Kexthor had joined the session. The military leader's species resembled armored bears with too many eyes and strong opinions about everything. Are you suggesting that established galactic child-rearing practices are inadequate? I'm suggesting that maybe treating children like small adults instead of, children, might not be the best approach. But surely, interjected Counselor Vex Prime, the traditional methods have proven effective for millennia. Have they? Because from what I've observed, most species seem to view their young as either miniature soldiers in training or diplomatic assets to be managed. When's the last time anyone asked what the kids actually wanted? The cubs, as if responding to her words, looked up from their breakfast with expressions of such obvious agreement that several council members actually flinched. The cubs appear to understand and respond to human communication patterns, Dr. Velthar noted, frantically taking notes. This suggests a level of cognitive compatibility that our models deemed impossible. They understand that I'm not trying to control them or use them for political purposes. It's not cognitive compatibility, it's basic trust. Basic trust, repeated Ambassador Kethlin slowly. That has resulted in the strongest interspecies bond recorded in galactic history. And that, announced High Admiral Kexthor, brings us to the real issue. Lila didn't like the sound of that. Which is? If humans can achieve this level of bonding with one species, what about others? We've already received 17 formal requests from various governments asking for human childcare specialists. 17? The number increases hourly, admitted Counselor Thexmar. It appears that word of your success has spread rapidly through diplomatic channels. One of the cubs had finished eating and was now attempting to climb into Lila's lap while she was still sitting at her desk. The others were watching this maneuver with obvious intent to follow suit. She could practically see the headlines. Human diplomat buried under pile of alien babies. Dr. Brennan, came another new voice, and Lila suppressed a groan as she recognized economic advisor Zal Keth, whose species had evolved from something that looked like a cross between a squid and a calculator. We need to discuss the economic implications of this development. Economic implications? If human childcare methods prove superior to traditional approaches, the demand for human services could destabilize entire sectors of the galactic economy. Childcare, education, social development, these represent trillions of credits in economic activity. You're talking about commodifying basic decency. We're talking about the most significant shift in galactic social dynamics in recorded history, Zalketh corrected. The potential profits are not the point, Lila snapped, causing all 6 cubs to look up in concern. She immediately softened her voice. Sorry, guys, the grown-ups are being stupid again. The cubs made sympathetic trilling sounds and pressed closer to her, which did absolutely nothing to help with the buried under alien babies situation. The point, she continued, addressing the council, is that these are children. Not economic opportunities, not diplomatic assets, not research subjects. Children, who deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Kindness and respect, mused High Admiral Kexthor. That appears to be uniquely human in its application. Which brings us to the security implications, added General Vrakken, whose appearance suggested that his species had evolved from particularly paranoid armored vehicles. If humans can influence alien juveniles to this degree, what does that mean for galactic stability? Lila stared at the holographic display of the council chamber, taking in the sea of alien faces all focused on her with varying degrees of awe, fear, and calculation. You think I'm some kind of threat? We think, said High Admiral Kexthor carefully, that you represent a capability that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in galactic civilization. By being nice to kids. By demonstrating that human social methods can override millions of years of evolutionary behavioral programming in alien species. One of the cubs had successfully made it into her lap and was now purring contentedly, while the others arranged themselves around her chair. The sound was oddly soothing, which was probably why she didn't immediately realize the significance of what the Admiral had just said. Wait, she said slowly. Are you saying that you think humans can… what? Brainwash alien children? We're saying, Ambassador Kethlin replied quietly, that you've accomplished something that our best xenopsychologists said was impossible, and if it can be done once, it can be done again, finished Dr. Velthar. Scaled up, systematized, weaponized. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Weaponized, Lila repeated flatly. The potential for social engineering on a galactic scale, General Vrakken explained, represents both an unprecedented opportunity and an existential threat. Lila looked down at the cubs, who were now dozing peacefully around her desk, like the world's most adorable security blanket. Then she looked back up at the council chamber, where the galaxy's leadership was apparently debating whether her ability to babysit constituted a weapon of mass destruction. You know what? She said finally. You're all insane. And then she cut the connection. The silence in her quarters was broken only by the soft purring of 6 alien cubs and the distant sound of her comm unit exploding with incoming emergency calls. Well, guys, she said to the cubs, I think we just started a diplomatic incident. The cubs purred louder, which she chose to interpret as approval. 3 days after Lila had hung up on the Galactic Council, her quarters had been transformed into what could charitably be called a diplomatic command center, and more accurately described as the galaxy's most heavily monitored daycare. The cubs had settled into a routine that involved breakfast, educational play, and what Lila had started calling strategic napping, which was when they all piled onto her while she tried to work. The strategic napping was currently in progress, which meant she was attempting to review diplomatic proposals while serving as a human-shaped furniture arrangement for 6 purring alien toddlers. Dr. Brennan, came Ambassador Kethlin's voice through the comm. We have a situation. Let me guess. Another species wants to send their kids for cultural exchange? 14 species, simultaneously. They're calling it the Brennan Protocol and demanding immediate implementation across their territories. Lila paused in her reading of a proposal titled Economic Restructuring of Galactic Childcare Industries, a Human-Centric Approach. The what now? The Brennan Protocol. Your methods of juvenile care have been analyzed, documented, and are now being hailed as the solution to interspecies social integration challenges that have persisted for millennia. My methods are, don't be a jerk to kids. That's not a protocol, it's basic decency. Basic decency that has resulted in the most successful cross-species bonding event in recorded history, came Dr. Velthar's voice. Lila looked down at the cubs, who were indeed thriving. They'd grown noticeably in just 3 days. Their fur had brightened to healthier colors, and they'd started demonstrating problem-solving skills that impressed even her. Currently, they were engaged in a complex engineering project involving her furniture and what appeared to be an attempt to build the perfect napping fort. If human social methods can facilitate this level of interspecies cooperation, We may be looking at a fundamental shift in galactic civilization, Dr. Velthar continued. You're talking about this like it's some kind of revolutionary breakthrough. I'm just treating them like people. Exactly, came High Counselor Zextel's voice. Dr. Brennan, what you consider basic decency represents a social technology that could transform interspecies relations across the galaxy. One of the cubs, Trouble, naturally, had figured out how to activate her holographic display, and was now projecting images of various alien species while making excited chittering sounds. The others gathered around to watch, occasionally pointing at species they recognized. Are they giving each other a xenobiology lesson? Lila asked. They appear to be sharing cultural information, Dr. Velthar confirmed. This level of educational self-direction is unprecedented in Zephyrian cubs. Maybe because no one ever gave them the chance before. Dr. Brennan, High Counselor Zextol's voice carried a weight that made her pay attention. We need to discuss the formal proposals that have been submitted to the Council. What kind of proposals? 17 different species have formally requested the establishment of human-run childcare facilities in their territories. The Krex Dominion wants to restructure their entire military academy system around human educational principles. Lila felt a sinking sensation. They want to turn this into some kind of galactic industry. They want to transform their societies, Ambassador Kethlin corrected. The data suggests that human social methods could reduce interspecies conflict, increase cooperation, and fundamentally improve quality of life across multiple civilizations. Or, came General Vexcool's voice, it could represent the most sophisticated form of cultural imperialism in galactic history. The cubs looked up at the sound of the general's voice, their fur shifting to warning colors. Trouble made a sound that was distinctly disapproving. The cubs appear to have developed negative associations with certain council members, Dr. Velthar noted. They're demonstrating good judgment, Lila corrected. They don't like people who see them as threats. Which brings us to the central issue, High Counselor Zextul said. Dr. Brennan, whether intentionally or not, you have demonstrated capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization. The question is, what do we do about it? Lila was quiet for a moment, absently stroking the fur of the cub in her lap. What do the cubs want? I'm sorry? The cubs? What do they want? Has anyone bothered to ask them? The silence that followed was telling. Dr. Brennan, Ambassador Kethlin said carefully, they're juveniles. Their preferences aren't typically considered in diplomatic decisions. Maybe that's the problem. She activated her holographic display, bringing up the council chamber. You want to know what the Brennan Protocol actually is? She said, addressing the council directly. It's asking what someone needs instead of assuming you know. It's listening to answers even when they're inconvenient. It's treating individuals as individuals instead of representatives of their species. Dr. Brennan, General Vexcool began. I'm not finished, she interrupted. You're also focused on the implications, and the protocols, and the potential threats that you're missing the actual point. These cubs aren't thriving because I have some magical human ability to control alien minds. They're thriving because I treat them like they matter. The cubs had gathered around her chair, listening intently. Trouble was translating her words into their language for the others. The reason your traditional methods don't work isn't because they're alien methods. It's because they're bad methods. You treat children like small adults, like diplomatic assets, like problems to be managed. And then you wonder why they don't cooperate. Are you suggesting, High Admiral Kexthor asked slowly, that the solution to interspecies conflict is better childcare? I'm suggesting that maybe if you raised kids to see other species as individuals instead of threats, you wouldn't have interspecies conflict in the first place. The murmur that ran through the council chamber was different this time. Less panic, more thoughtfulness. The human raises an interesting point, admitted Councillor Thexmar. Our current social structures do tend to perpetuate species-based divisions. Because that's how you designed them, Lila said. But it doesn't have to be that way. What are you proposing, Dr. Brennan? High Counselor Zextol asked. Lila looked down at the cubs, who were watching her with expressions of complete trust and confidence. I'm proposing that we start small. A pilot program. Mixed-species childcare facilities run by humans, but with input from all participating cultures. See what happens when kids grow up seeing diversity as normal instead of threatening. And if it works, then maybe in 20 years we'll have a generation of adults who think cooperation is more interesting than conflict. And if it doesn't work? Lila shrugged. Then you'll have a bunch of kids who got treated with kindness and respect for a few years. Worst case scenario, they'll be slightly better adjusted. The council chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Ambassador Keith Lynn spoke up. The Zephyrian Empire would be willing to participate in such a pilot program. As would the Viridian Commonwealth, added another voice. Within minutes, 17 species had formally expressed interest in what was apparently now being called the Galactic Childhood Development Initiative. Dr. Brennan, High Counselor Zextul said finally, it appears you've just been appointed Director of Interspecies Child Development for the Galactic Council. I didn't apply for that job. Nevertheless, you appear to have it. Lila looked around her quarters, taking in the sight of 6 alien cubs who had somehow become her responsibility, the stack of diplomatic proposals on her desk, and the holographic display showing dozens of species representatives all looking at her with expressions of hope and expectation. This is insane, she said. This is revolutionary, corrected Dr. Velthar. You've just accidentally solved one of the oldest problems in galactic civilization. By being nice to kids. By treating them like people, Ambassador Kethlin corrected. Which, as it turns out, was revolutionary after all. One of the cubs climbed into her lap and began purring, apparently satisfied that the adults had finally figured out something obvious. The others settled around her chair, creating their familiar security blanket formation. Well, Lila said to the cubs, I guess we're about to find out if kindness really can change the galaxy. The cubs purred their agreement, and somewhere in the background, she could hear the sound of galactic civilization quietly reorganizing itself around the radical concept that children deserve to be treated well. Director Brennan, came High Counselor Zextul's voice, welcome to your new career in galactic social engineering. Thanks, she said dryly. I hate it already. But as she said it, she was smiling, and the cubs were purring. And across the galaxy, parents were starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was a better way to raise their children. The revolution had begun with 6 scared alien babies, and a human who thought kindness was more important than protocol. As revolutions went, it was probably the most adorable one in galactic history.